as we pray, as we offer our sympathy and solidarity to those who have suffered, let us also pray that we might find within each of us, within this community, and within the traditions that we share, the resources we need to show the world that there is another way. A way in which white supremacy is no more, a way where hatred and fear are ever decreasing, a way in which peace grows in every heart and is found in every hearth, a way in which we are wise enough to remember that it is human hands and human hearts that cause much of the suffering in the world, and that it is within the power of our human hands and human hearts to choose differently. That we might each be instruments of peace, love, and the dismantling of the injustices and hatred of the world. I invite the congregation to say, Amen. We pause now to lift up that which is heavy and light upon us. We lift up Edmund Pantaleano and Lydia Bedreau-Reed. They are both having surgery later this week, and we wish each of them a speedy recovery and hold them in our hearts. I invite you now to say the name or bring to mind those you wish to be held in the loving embrace of this community. In this great cloud of witness, amid this beloved community, we hear these names and hold them in our hearts. Let us also extend our sympathy and empathy to all the suffering that remains unspoken amongst us and celebrate all the joy that has not been named. We pause now in awe, wonder, and of the beauty, diversity, and mystery that is life. In the spirit of love, in the spirit of hope, and in the spirit of compassion, I invite each of you into a time of silent meditation, reflection, or prayer.
Each week, our morning offering is shared with an organization that shares our Unitarian, Universalist values, and through which we may live out our principles in the world. This week, that organization is very well known to us, and it is the Rutherford B.H. Yates Museum. We have Catherine Roberts with us this morning. She's the co-founder and executive director, and she'll give us some highlights of the organization.
Thank you all very much. It has been 25 years since Luther Brown, one of your members, who was in your choir, introduced us to you and brought your people and your passion for social justice. It started as a educational program, saving houses for museums, and it grew into an incredible journey that we didn't expect. But Luther Brown found a safe home here. He grew up as a child in the Jim Crow era, and he was a kind man. And when he came to First UU, he said he felt safe. He was surrounded by friends, and he continued to work with us. He's no longer with us now, but in his memory, I'd like to thank you. Thousands of hours that you have given over those 25 years. Your members have worked in crumbling houses with all kinds of debris falling out of ceilings, and it's just been, and working in 30-degree temperature and 97-degree temperature through COVID and everything to create these museum houses for the children. The children need to know about the heroes. They need to walk in those houses and on those brick streets that were made by the freedmen. And your congregation has made that happen. We are really very grateful for all you've done for Warren and Phil and Joe and Evan, just to name a few, and Joan. And we are grateful for any other assistance you can continue to help us with. And thank you very much for being a social justice advocate. It's just incredible that your congregation has not wavered from difficult situations. And we're really grateful at the Yates Museum for any support that you may be able to provide. Catherine, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Those in our sanctuary will find the instructions for text giving in the order of service, and those watching the live stream will see the instructions on your screen. Our regular Sunday morning offering collection invites us to weave a tapestry of love and action. First Church's Community Projects team has been instrumental in restoring and preserving historic buildings at the Yates Museum. We ask you to give generously. An offering will now be greatly received.
Dedicate our offering found in your order of service. To the work of this church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Our first reading this morning comes from The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Matsu Basho. Days and months are travelers of eternity. So are the years that pass by. Those who steer a boat across a sea or drive a horse over the earth till they succumb to the weight of years spend every minute of their lives traveling. There have been a great number of ancients, too, who have died on the road. I myself have been tempted for a long time by the cloud-moving wind, filled with a strong desire to wander. It was only towards the end of last autumn that I returned from rambling along the coast. Here ends the first reading.
The second reading this morning is from Summer on the Lakes in 1843 by Margaret Fuller. I'm following this winding, hilly road for 4 or 5 miles. I think I counted at least a dozen new kinds of flowers, not timid, retiring ones, but bold flowers of rich colors, covering the ground in abundance. One very common flower resembles our cardinal flower, though not so deep a color. Another is very like rocket or phlox, but smaller and of various colors, white, blue, purple. I followed on this road till I came to the prairie which skirts in the river, and this, of all the beauties of this region, is the most peculiar and wonderful. Imagine a vast and gently swelling pasture of the brightest green grass, stretching away from you on every side, behind, toward these hills I have described, in all other directions, to generous soil. It is an unimagined picture of abundance and peace.
Please join me in singing hymn number 1003, which you can find in your teal hymnal. We will sing each line twice through before moving to the next. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going?
So I brought Basho with me. Matsu Basho, do you know him? The great 17th century Japanese poet author of the famous haiku, breaking the silence of an ancient pond, a frog jumped into the water, a deep resonance. Last week in New Mexico, I went backpacking with 2 Episcopalian priests in the Gila National Wilderness, along the west and middle forks of the Gila River. I was invited by one of my oldest friends, the Reverend Noah Evans, rector of St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania. He was the recipient of a grant from the Lilly Foundation to organize a group of clergy to go hiking for a week, and he invited me to come along. And so, in addition to my sleeping bag, sleeping pad, lightweight one-person tent, 5 days worth of dehydrated food, change of clothing, and change of socks, and all my other backpacking gear, I brought Basho with me. His text, "The Narrow Road to the Deep North," has long been one of my favorites. It was with awe that I beheld fresh leaves, green leaves, bright in the sun. He wrote it as a record, a reflection of a 6-month walking journey that he took into northern Japan. It's considered by many poets and scholars and religious practitioners to be one of the great contemplative travel logs and sketches and pilgrimage narratives. Its title is deceptive. The narrow road that Basho travels is meant to have double meaning. It signifies not only the poet's excursion into the north of Japan, but also the narrow path that leads to enlightenment and wisdom. In the text, an encounter with pines of the freshest green, their branches curved in exquisite lines bent by the wind, becomes an opportunity to reflect on the poet's human limits. My pen strove in vain to equal the superb creation of divine artifacts, he writes. I brought the text with me because I thought that since I was traveling with a group of clergy, I might turn the hike into something of a pilgrimage. Pilgrimage is one of the oldest of spiritual practices. It's found in many traditions and practiced in a variety of different ways. Sometimes pilgrims embark in the direction of a particular sacred site. I once walked a portion of the Camino de Santiago and trod for a week along a route in northern Spain, leading to the supposed resting place of James, son of Zebedee, and Salome, an apostle of Jesus. Other times, pilgrims simply set off on a journey, hoping to find something within themselves. Basho's journey was like that. Margaret Fuller, whose text Summer on the Lakes we also read from, was similar, and so was my hike along the Gila. Have you ever taken such a journey where you set off for nowhere in particular, hoping to learn a little bit more about yourself, getting away from the daily distractions, glimpsing something of the dark night sky? The stars are luminous outside of the city, and maybe, just maybe, experiencing a deeper sense of connection with the beauty and mystery of the world. It is a well-established practice within the Unitarian Universalist tradition. Transcendentalists like Fuller and Ralph Waldo Emerson engaged in it regularly. Fuller, whose name might be less familiar to you than Emerson's, grew up in a 19th century Unitarian household in Massachusetts and went on to become one of the first professional travel writers. Summer on the Lakes chronicles her sojourn through the part of the country we now call the Rust Belt. In the 1840s, much of it was, for people of European descent, largely unknown. The colonial process was really just getting started, and much of the land remained under the sovereignty of indigenous nations. And white settlers from the east, with the support of the federal government, were threatening nations like the Chippewa and Ottawa with genocide. Like many of her fellow transcendentalists, Fuller was disturbed by and opposed to the genocidal practices of the federal government and white settlers. She traveled for several months, chronicling the natural beauty of the region. And in her writing, she strove to portray the indigenous peoples of places like Michigan in ways that they were rarely described by other white writers of her generation, as opposed to others who depicted them as either a demigod or a beast. She tried to portray them as what they simply were, human. Fuller's text, like Basho's, is worth reading. Alongside her reflections on the humanity of peoples, often cast by other writers as less than humans, she celebrated the sublimity she found during her wanderings. On the cusps of the Niagara Falls, amid prairie flowers, on the shores of vast lakes, she wrote of how encounters with all the beauties of the region offered her an essential experience of being. Caught up in the vast presence of a gentle swelling pasture of the brightest green grass, stretching away from on every side, behind, towards these hills, in all other directions to a generous soil, she realizes simply that she has come to understand in such moments when we are confronted with floral magnificence of various colors, white, purple, and blue, that it is good to be here. It is good to be here. I often had that simple thought as we walked 26 miles in 4 days, up the West Fork of the Gila, over one side of the Lily Mountain, back down the other side to the canyon carved out by the Middle Fork, and then along the path, past the Jordan Hot Springs, where we stopped for a delicious hour's soak, up to the point where the Little Bear Canyon intersects with the Middle Fork, crossing the river some 50 times, and then out to the visitor center, passing another hot spring, this one too sulfur-laden to sit in for the completion of the hike. As we talked, as we tramped along, about ministry, about the differences between our traditions, our families, and look, there's a wild boar. No, it's a javelina, a squat pig-like peccary with salt and pepper bristles. It travels in herds, and there, 3 of them are scrambling up the rocks. One foot followed the other for 26 miles. Mostly we moved in silence, stopping sometimes for water or shade or two. Do you see the way that cactus has grown up in the stone crevice? The one right there with a bunch of bristling spheres and a red flower on top. I think it's called a peppercorn. Walking, crossing the river, walking, then back that way, a pool of fish-sized fat tadpoles, the speckled flash of trout. All rocks are slippery, and walking. The journey's quiet, Basho as companion. In the utter silence of a temple, a cicada's voice alone penetrates the rocks. There are certain practices that are useful on any pilgrimage. And I want to share with you 4 that have helped my own journeys to be successful. And by successful, the journey is as much inward as outward. For me, any pilgrimage can be judged as successful if it gives me with a deeper sense of connection to the beauty of the earth and my own inner spark. For you, well, you have to figure out what makes a journey successful for yourself. That's part of the process of discovery. The first practice of pilgrimage is to travel with a tradition. Traditions offer us guideposts, instructions, information about what might be encountered along the way. We live in a pluralistic society. We are surrounded by numerous traditions, and you have something of an option as to which tradition or traditions you will engage with on your journey. One of my traveling companions was quite aware of this. He had started out life as an evangelical Christian before encountering Episcopalianism in seminary. He chose that tradition only to be caught up in a schismatic conflict between the Episcopal Church and the emerging politically reactionary Anglican Church of North America. He made his choice and stuck with the Episcopalians. I brought with me my Unitarian Universalist connections to Transcendentalism, attend to all the beauties of the region. Remember, it is good to be here. And my longtime literary predilection for Japanese Buddhist poetry. I felt quite at home, as if it were mine, sleeping lazily in the house of fresh air. Which traditions do you walk with? I hope that if you have come here this morning or joined us online, one of the traditions that you have chosen to walk with is Unitarian Universalism. As someone like Fuller should hopefully remind us, it offers us depths that can inspire us, in her words, to open ourselves to the grandeur, somewhat eternal, if not infinite, which surrounds us. My companions walked with their Episcopalian Christian faith. This caused us to see the landscape differently. Those columns of rock, wind-carved pillars some 100 feet tall, their colors shift with the light, moving from red to orange to even white and almost gray as the sun peaks and then fades. For me, it was like something of a Georgia O'Keeffe painting or a poem out of season but apt by Basho. Whiter far than the white rocks of the Temple Rocks, the autumn wind that blows. For my companions, it was a reminder of Simon the Stylite, the 5th century Christian mystic who spent more than 30 years perched atop a narrow stone pillar. He climbed up there in an effort to devote himself to the spiritual life, to the pursuit of union with his God, and stayed so committed to his striving toward the divine that he died upon the rock which he perched. Christians like to speak of sacrifice when they describe the religious life, a framework that I am somewhat suspicious of for reasons that extend far beyond the limits of this sermon. Nonetheless, the presence of my Christian friends brings me to a second important practice to be found in pilgrimage. Do not travel alone. Basho and Fuller both went on sojourns with companions. Basho walked the road to the north with his neighbor Sorrow, who wanted, like the great poet, to enjoy the views, share the hardships of the wandering life, and find something of religious enlightenment. Fuller traveled with her friend, Caroline Sturgis Tappan, another poet and transcendentalist to whom she dedicated her book, writing, "When weary hours of brief refreshment crave, I give you what I can, not what I would." I give you what I can, not what I would. It seems a good motto for travelers together on the pilgrim road. In both literary cases, the writer's companion shares with them the challenges of travel, but there is always a limit to the companionship. Each traveler lightens the loads of the others, but in the end, everyone has to take their steps alone. Sorrow carries some of the things Basho needs for his travel. Basho carries some of the things that Sorrow needs for his. Fuller and Tappan bless each other with company, but both have their separate experiences, made richer by the other's presence, but still ultimately their own. For my part, I walked with my Episcopalian friends. The advantage of hiking with others is many. You can spread the load. I carried much food. Noah had a stove and cook set. Our other traveling companion brought with him other essentials. And you can quicken the camp work. I can purify water when you set up the tents. You can make dinner while I find logs for us to sit on. Now, I'm not going to claim that companions are strictly necessary for pilgrimage. We encountered more than one person on the trail out for a solo hike, but they certainly help. Basho himself never traveled alone and emphasized the enlightening gifts he found in his companions, in his own work. He even included their words in his texts. A poem for a pair of faithful osprey nesting on a rock. What divine instinct has taught these birds no waves swell so high as to swamp their home? Written by Sora. One portion of the narrow road to the deep north reads. Earlier in his book, Basho also reminds us of another important practice of pilgrimage. It's easier if you bring the right gear. In his opening passage, he provides us a list of all that he carried on his bony shoulders, which were sore because of the load, before remarking, there are always certain things that I could not throw away for either practical or sentimental reasons. When you hike, you have to carry with you whatever you're going to have on your time on the trail. You have to ask yourself, what is essential? What do I truly need? And you have to think about what is extraneous. Each item you take will go upon your bony shoulders and weigh you down on each of your steps. Do I need 3 pairs of socks or 2? Can I wash one in the stream each night and let it dry overnight? Is rain gear essential? We're in a desert and there's no forecast for rain. How many water bottles do I really need? Should we bring a set of cards to play at night? In the end, what you pack reflects the wisdom you've gained from previous times on the trail and your own anxieties. I can get by with only 2 pairs of socks because I can wash them each night. It seems important to pack something possible for every known ailment known to human or beast, just in case. That snakebite kit is not all that effective, but maybe it'll make us feel better. In the end, though, there are some things that you have to bring with you if you want to have a pleasant time on the trail. Good boots are a must. A sleeping roll, a pad, a decent tent seem like requirements. You have to have food, especially in a desert where someone like me, capable enough of foraging in the Northeast, is uncertain if we're going to find this plant or that mushroom. You should bring with you? Well, that question becomes part of the opportunity for spiritual reflection. What is it that you need? What is it that you merely want? Why? A fourth practice of pilgrimage is twofold and deceptively simple. You have to know your route, and you need to be aware that it contains many decision points. We had with us a map of the Gila National Forest, one of those pieces of gear that we deemed essential. It told us where the trail began, where it ended, where it split, and what might be found along the way. Looking at the map, we always knew approximately where we were and what more we could expect to find along the way. This helped with pacing. We had to walk so many miles each day, and it helped with picking places to camp. If we keep going past this bend, it looks like there's a good place to pitch our tents for the night. As we moved along, we were constantly making choices. Do we stop here or go on? Should we put our packs down and explore? Is it too early to halt for lunch? Do we have enough water, or do we need to purify some more? Is this a good spot to rest and try to catch some trout? Each decision we made shaped how we moved along our hike. It altered what we saw and how we saw it. Exploring Little Bear Canyon, which splits off the main route, mid-afternoon entering a twilight space when full sun shone behind us. If we had come earlier, chosen to hurry past another part of the trail, we would have been caught in a different kind of light. The trees, the walls, this flower and that would have all cast different colors. Sometimes we were only aware that we had made a decision in retrospect. We thought about stopping for the night by the Jordan Hot Springs, perfect as they were for casting off the trail's dust, but pressed on because we wanted to see the Little Bear Canyon that same day. When we woke up and set out the next day, it soon became clear that the last good place to camp was where we had stopped the night before, and so we ended up finishing our trail a day early. Have you ever had a similar experience, where you realize afterwards that you made some kind of important decision for finishing the trail a day early was important for our pilgrimage, only when you look back? I certainly have, and those experiences have not just been on the trail. Sometimes the smallest decisions we make can turn out to be the most important. You decide to go out to this party rather than that one and meet someone who alters your life's course. You sign up for this class rather than that one on a whim. They both seem interesting, and you pretty much flipped a coin. And then you discover what becomes your career. I suspect such stories are familiar. Walking along the route with a tradition, with companions, and the gear you carry, these are 4 practices that I find within pilgrimage. Basho opened his text with the insight that to live is to undertake a journey. Days and months are travelers of eternity. So the years pass on and pass by. Then he invited his readers into a conversation about what more of life's journey could be learned from the intentional practice of travel. The pilgrimage practices I have named: tradition, companions, what you place upon your bony shoulders, and walking a route. Each offers a lesson for our ordinary lives. I anticipate you know that already. Imagine you're here with us today because you are seeking or have found something within the Unitarian Universalist tradition that helps you find meaning in the world. You are probably also here looking for, or you have found good companions and some insight on what you might carry on your shoulders. And I expect that you know that you are moving through the journey of life, constantly beset with decision points. Come to this service this morning, listen online, or go for a rainy morning hike. Tradition, companions, the loads we carry, the paths we select. These are some of what is to be learned when we walk along a pilgrimage, and what is to be found as we, like Basho and Margaret Fuller, find ourselves travelers upon the road to eternity. May we, like both of them, find ourselves blessed with good tradition, companions, and all that we need to move through our life ever more aware of what is to be found. Amen, and blessed be.
Please join me in singing hymn number 1018 from your teal hymnal.
Come and go with me to that land.
In closing, please join me with the words in the order of service for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
We leave this place with these words from Basho. From this day forth, I shall be called a wanderer. May his words remind us that all life is a journey. Go in peace, go in love. May our lives be a blessing. Amen. Thank you so much for watching our service today. We're glad you're part of our online community, where we welcome people who are diverse in faith, ethnicity, history, as well as gender identity and sexual orientation. There are many different ways you can get involved in our community. One you can do right now is by clicking like below or subscribing to our channel. If you're interested in joining our congregation, please email us at membership@firstgu.org. Thanks so much for joining us.